Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank Solange and the organizers of this meeting for the invitation and the opportunity to present. I don't have any financial disclosures to report, and this talk represents my personal views and not the official position of the FDA. I'd like to start off by talking about the current regulatory landscape. Based on national vital statistics, we know that there are approximately 3.6 million births that occur in the US every year. And we also know, based on published data, that the vast majority of pregnant individuals take at least one medication during pregnancy, excluding vitamins and minerals. There may be a need to take a medication during pregnancy due to chronic conditions or due to acute conditions that arise during pregnancy, like hyperemesis gravidarum, urinary tract infections, etc. And yet, pregnant individuals are often left out of drug development. This is because currently there are no requirements to study drugs in pregnancy. And so drugs get approved with only animal data in labeling, and it takes years and years to get any kind of human data to inform the safety and dosing during pregnancy. The COVID-19 pandemic clearly illustrated the need for early planning and consideration for inclusion of pregnant individuals in clinical trials. As products and vaccines were being authorized under emergency use or approved, the public was wondering, are these products, are these vaccines safe and effective to use in pregnancy? There are regulatory advances that are occurring. So the good news is that the common rule for human subject protection has removed reference to pregnant individuals as vulnerable. And FDA recently published a proposed rule to do the same. There are currently several challenges, but perhaps the most important ones that we keep hearing about from our stakeholders at public meetings are the following. We've heard from industry representatives that industry is risk averse and very concerned about liability issues and the feasibility of including pregnant individuals in their development trials. Ethical issues are very complex, and IRBs may have lack of experience and comfort working with this population. There's also a long-standing history of exclusion of pregnant individuals from clinical trials, which makes it difficult to change the thinking on this issue and also changing the policies. So what is FDA doing to advance the conduct of clinical trials in pregnancy? FDA's perspective is that the health of the child begins with the health of the mother. So we need to switch our thinking from just focusing on risks to the fetus to a broader perspective of the benefit to the pregnant individuals and also the benefit that the child will derive as well. Altered physiology in pregnancy may impact drug efficacy and safety, so it's important to get pharmacokinetic trials conducted in pregnancy. And similar to pediatrics, pregnant individuals should have access to products that have been appropriately evaluated. FDA has published several guidances that discuss clinical trials in pregnancy. The Clinical Trials in Pregnancy Guidance published in 2018, this guidance discusses the scientific and ethical considerations for inclusion of pregnant individuals in clinical trials, including how to handle women who become pregnant during a trial. In 2020, the FDA published the guidance for industry on enhancing the diversity of clinical trial populations, eligibility criteria, enrollment practices, and trial designs in the effort to broaden eligibility criteria to include populations that have been historically underrepresented in clinical trials, including pregnant individuals. There's a section in this guidance that discusses the need to conduct PK trials during drug development. The guidance for industry on the conduct of PK trials was published in 2004 and is currently undergoing revision. During the pandemic, CDER published a guidance on developing drugs and biologic products for treatment or prevention of COVID-19. In May of 2020, that included language that encouraged the inclusion of pregnant individuals in these trials. The revised guidance that published in February of 2021 included stronger language that said that pregnant individuals should be enrolled in phase 3 clinical trials when appropriate. Similarly, CBER published a guidance on the development and licensure of vaccines to prevent COVID-19 and recommended the early conduct of developmental and reproductive studies to allow pregnant women to enroll in clinical trials. The regulatory considerations for the inclusion of pregnant individuals in clinical trials include the following. Have the 10 regulatory requirements of 45 CFR 46 subpart B, additional protections for pregnant women in clinical research, been met? Are the non-clinical studies complete? As we saw during the pandemic, the lack of availability of non-clinical studies resulted in the exclusion or the delayed inclusion of pregnant individuals in clinical trials of COVID-19 therapeutics and vaccines. Are there preliminary studies that have been done in non-pregnant women that can inform the risk of a trial that includes pregnant women? Does the trial have a prospect of direct benefit to the pregnant woman or the fetus? And if it doesn't, then is the risk to the fetus minimal? What are the benefit-risk considerations? Are we talking about a clinical trial that's being conducted in the pre-marketing setting with limited data, or the post-marketing setting of an approved drug? Does the trial involve administration of a study drug, or is it an opportunistic design study, such as a PK study that involves enrollment of pregnant individuals who are already taking a medication as part of clinical care? FDA is involved in various collaborations to advance the conduct of clinical trials in pregnancy. FDA was part of the task force on research specific to pregnant and lactating women, also referred to as PregLac. The objectives of this task force were to identify and address gaps in knowledge and research regarding safe and effective therapies for pregnant women and lactating women. FDA, in collaboration with other stakeholders, including other various federal agencies, representatives from industry and academia, worked together for several years to publish reports and recommendations that were submitted to the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services in Congress in 2018 and 2020. Key recommendations relevant to clinical trials that came out of the PregLac reports include the following. Increase the quantity, quality, and timeliness of research involving products used by pregnant women. So stakeholders need to think about what studies are needed in pregnant women and to plan accordingly. Similarly, implement a proactive approach to protocol development and study design. So moving away from automatic exclusion of pregnant individuals in clinical trials to thoughtful consideration of how to include them. There needs to be a systematic plan during drug development for timely collection of data, including PK data in pregnant women, to avoid any delays in getting this information. There's a need to strengthen and expand the existing infrastructure for conducting PK and PD studies. And there's a need to develop new research tools and innovative approaches for PK and PD assessment in pregnancy. As part of FDA's effort to advance the conduct of clinical studies in pregnancy, we held a public workshop on PK evaluation in pregnancy in May of this year. It generated a lot of interest. There were over 1,200 people who registered for this virtual public workshop, and it was reported in the Pink Sheet at the end of May. Key takeaways from this public workshop include the following. Lack of PK data may result in incorrect dosing and adversely impact safety and/or efficacy, highlighting the need to conduct these studies. Timely PK data are needed. As we heard during the public workshop, it takes approximately 7 years to get PK data in antiretroviral drugs that are newly approved, and this is the best case scenario in terms of therapeutic area where PK studies are actually being done in pregnancy. There's a need for early conduct of the non-clinical studies to facilitate enrollment of pregnant individuals in PK studies. We also had presentations from a lot of modelers, and we heard that modeling-based approaches may have an important role in the planning and analysis of PK data collection in pregnancy. And then finally, stakeholder collaboration is important for progress in this area. FDA was involved in the planning and the conduct of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine Clinical Trials in Pregnant and Lactating Persons public workshop that was held in June of this year. Some takeaways from this public workshop include the following. Similar to pediatrics, there's a need to protect pregnant individuals through research, not from research. Some gaps that were identified during the public workshop include the need for education of IRBs related to studies that include pregnant individuals, and the need for community engagement to try to reach populations that have been historically underrepresented in clinical trials. We heard from investigators and representatives of industry related to successful examples of inclusion of pregnant persons in clinical trials. For example, in the therapeutic area of antiretrovirals, maternal immunization for group B beta strep, and RSV prevention in the newborn, etc. All of this demonstrated that with collaboration, the inclusion of pregnant individuals in clinical trials is very feasible. In terms of next steps, the National Academies has been awarded funding from NICHD to conduct a study assessing the liability issues related to inclusion of pregnant individuals in clinical trials, and then to work on the development of a framework to try to address these liability issues. FDA is also involved in global efforts to advance clinical trials in pregnancy. FDA, in collaboration with the European Medicines Agency and the UK Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency, recently formed a pregnancy and lactation cluster to discuss scientific and regulatory issues, including advancing the conduct of clinical trials. This platform has provided an opportunity to align among regulators, and we recently published an article on the need to advance data collection in these populations. Additionally, we are in the early stages of planning the development of an ICH guideline on the inclusion of pregnant and breastfeeding individuals in clinical trials. In summary, FDA views the lack of data in pregnant and lactating individuals as a public health issue that needs to be addressed as a priority. Clinical trials are an important part of FDA's commitment to advance data collection in pregnant individuals. We have come a long way as there is growing recognition among the public and among stakeholders that pregnant individuals need to be included in clinical studies to optimize clinical care. We acknowledge that there are a lot of challenges, but we are hopeful regarding opportunities. Perhaps there are lessons to be learned from the pediatric experience. And finally, early planning and collaboration are key to moving forward. Thank you very much for your attention.